Hopefully a quick video response to that Glenn Steigner guy. One more shot maybe. I was a little bit rude, but that's the way it works out. So again, paraphrasing his video, his hour and 8-minute video, was just basically about psychology, just in some sort of description of what humans are generally psychologically. And I say, who cares to that? It's really not the argument for anti-nihilism, so I'll make the argument, the logical premises that kind of define the story. I don't think there's much point in talking about things like, well, how much you love your mother, or that people, generally speaking, love their mothers. We all know that our mothers don't earn our love or our respect. That if we're going to be honest, okay, we can say honestly there's a prejudice there. There's a built-in familiarity that creates a prejudice that's just a pile of crap, that our mothers aren't better than any other woman or any other mother just by default. They're not superior in some way. And they haven't earned our love. Just as our own kids would also be a prejudice. They're not any better than any other kids. They're not any more deserving of your love or your care or your concern. It's just bullshit. It's just psychological nonsense. And although we can't necessarily live in any other world but with our psychology, that some of this stuff we are going to be owned by, that we can philosophically recognize it and just admit what it is and call it bullshit when it's bullshit. And there's times when that's sort of important, especially when we're going to define social policy or some other kind of thing, that we ought to be able to admit that nepotism is bullshit, nationalism is bullshit, racism is bullshit, and we just move past all that crap. So anyway, I think it's important to this anti-nihilist subject just because the subject is about a philosophy. It's about understanding. It's not just about being miserable or being dissatisfied. It's not even about wanting to die. It's about recognizing that you're in a game that's just too messy to force somebody else into. That there's no cause or reason to play with this mess. And that although you might be caught up in, you might be addicted to the heroin, and you might be sort of wanting to think you can still grab hold of something out of this slop, you could recognize that you wouldn't create somebody or force them into the same circumstance. We've all had things happen that we say, well, I can live with that, but I wouldn't want somebody else to endure that experience or learn the hard way or all that kind of stuff. You'd say, why not take a shorter, more direct line? So anyway, here's the quick rundown is simple. These are the philosophical facts. These are the premises that you have to argue past, because otherwise it's just a rational conclusion based on these premises. You have to defeat some of these premises for anti-natalism not to be a rational and sensible attitude to have towards life. And that's just the way it is. So this is the story of life on Earth or in the universe, is that you have this bizarre circumstance that took place on planet Earth some 4 billion years ago, where one piece of chemistry, just one, through perfect storm circumstances, the right bits of chemistry came together, and you had a replicating molecule that basically was playing the role of a blueprint that was readable. And that would dictate the performance of the reproduction. The reproduction would be basically a duplicate of the blueprint. That was the fundamental part of the replication. And it just kept replicating, and it's replicating in kind of a closed system. And one would assume that the first replications were very successful. There was nothing to eat them, nothing to stop them. So as long as they were in the same environment that formed the first one, the second one would find life habitable. And there's theorized that from that grew our present atmosphere and its conditions, that the oxygen that we now find so pleasant to breathe was really the waste product of the first generation of life on Earth. That they polluted the the planet so massively with their waste that we now live in their sewage. And so anyway, life evolved. Okay, it plays the game. The little machines that are created are each unique in a sense that they each have potential mutations, modifications, changes, and soon changing becomes something advantageous to long-term survivability, so it becomes part of the genetic code. That there actually be maybe even forcible, maybe even deliberately on purpose accidents caused by the genetic code to create more mutation, to create more opportunity for diversity and success. Your ancestors to survive likely had to be exceptional. They had to be better, and usually better is going to require a change and an error. And those errors, all the good errors, end up surviving. Good in the sense of making you more survivable, not necessarily good by any other definition except for survivability. And so over, billions of years, hundreds of millions for sentient life. Well, let's get to the sentient part. So at some point in this history, these little machines, these little DNA molecules with wheels, they start acquiring more and more tools, more and more parts. Okay, they get wheels and steering wheels and radar and higher performance engines, and they become very good at playing the game, sophisticated, complicated. They just keep adding features, adding an extra light bulb, adding an extra this and extra that. And after billions of years, you have these pretty sophisticated animals now walking the earth, both in insects and in reptiles and in mammals. You have different attributes, different skill sets of sophistication. Certainly insects, although they may not be as intelligent as humans or even mammals, clearly have some incredible features in terms of their toolbox, incredible sophistication, and are highly efficient in terms of resources consumed for actions produced. But anyway, regardless, it's just about surviving, niche survival. And because all this competition is taking place in this closed arena, the system starts feeding on itself. The competitors start feeding on each other. And that becomes part of the game, is how well you can first steal some energy from your competitors to defeat your competitors, other competitors. And we're almost using other animals to help us defeat other animals on all different levels of the competition that we're entered in. All this happens for no good reason, just because replication for the sake of replication. That's the principle underlying it all. Replication for the sake of replication. Let's say it a third time. Replication for the sake of replication. There's no other agenda. There's no other system. There's no other guidepost. There's no other anything. It's just it can do it, now it will do it. It happens, so it will continue to happen until something stops it from happening. That's how reproduction works. Something has to stop it. And that's it. That's the story. I mean, that's all it is. There's stupid evolution by stupid standards. It's a gladiator game. The organisms fight it out. The little machines fight it out over, who's the slickest, who's the fastest. So you could think of it like a demolition derby. Give all the cars personalities and say they go into the arena and beat the crap out of each other for the silly reward of just saying, I'm better than that. I survived that. It doesn't matter whether you did it through cheating, tripping. There's nobody to throw a red flag. There's no umpire. There's no rules. There's just winners and losers. And that's it. But theoretically, winners and losers. Like I said, winning is just still being here is how we've defined it. But there might be more victory in being the loser, because winning isn't winning. It's sentencing your kind to, perhaps millions of years of pointless and futile struggle for nothing, for the stupid title. It's an empty title. It's an empty victory. There's no reward, there's no prize, there's no accomplishment in it, there's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. I guess I should say the other element of this is this addiction element, the one that ties us to this game. With the Glenn guy, again, is talking about the pleasures that we're seeking, and it's not really pleasure, it's just desire. Addiction's a lot different than pleasure, and it's it's a motivating force, not unlike what the DNA molecule is doing. It's replication for the sake of replication, and addiction is essentially want or desire or chase for the sake of the chase. Satisfying addictions is a lot different than an actual accomplishment. It's sometimes just getting back what you've lost. And that's part of the mechanism used to motivate us, keep us in the game, is to attach us to it, to make us want it, to make us want to make us think there's value in the game, that there's value in pursuing what's at tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or 10 years from now. And we get caught up in pursuing because we think we need, we feel we need, but in truth, when we really look at that psychology, we can see in most cases we don't really need, because when we get what we're after, we often figure out that there's other things that we want to get now that we're always going to want, that we won't be completely or perfectly or in any kind of finished manner satisfied. And as most lives turn out, they are full of chase and game when you're young, and it starts waning as you get older, and by the end of your life, you're going to be wishing for mercy. You're going to be looking for a way out, a graceful end. That's what you're going to be hoping for. So in a sense, it's all fail anyway. Your triumph is taken away. Your victory is washed out of the record. So you won't remain the king. So what's the point? It's a waste of effort. And then the other argument is this is all at this huge price of all these victims we create by playing the game. All the people who draw the short straw, who are handed the short straw, the Frankenstein life, Frankenstein monster life, and it's at their expense. And in nature, that's most of the animals are going to be drawing a short straw, going to have a hard time, going to be blighted badly, aren't going to get off easy, and they're going to get off hard. They're going to pay hard in terms of what they're going to experience in terms of suffering, and for nothing, for no accomplishment, for nothing. Is there really some point? If dragonflies have been very successful, if they existed or didn't exist, would you really care? And if you didn't care, would any other part of the universe care? There's only you to care, and how or why you care, we can already understand. It's just psychological bullshit. Your perception of some need for there to be a tomorrow, or 500 years from tomorrow, or 1,000 years from tomorrow, is just a stupid perception in your head. Argue to me some other rationale. It's not some kind of logical desire. You don't want it because it's, some sort of rational, good argument you can give for it. You only want it because you're afraid not to. You're afraid to think it's a waste. You're afraid to believe it's pointless. You're afraid to admit it's futile. But there's no rational reason for anything to exist on this planet today, tomorrow, or for the next 10,000 years, or for the next 10 million years. It won't do anything more, it won't do anything better than it did the first 4 billion years, and all it did was waste suffering, or at least for the last 500,000 since the first ouch. Yes, this video is longer than I thought it would be. Yeah, I'm tired. You probably noticed. One of those days, I'm kind of just, eyes aren't all the way open. So anyway, it's an argument premised on those facts. Those facts are what lead you to these conclusions. You could be depressed in life, and that's not going to mean you're going to say give up on life or hate life or find it stupid unless you believe these things. You have to have these things in your belief bag, or you're not going to draw these conclusions. You're just going to assume that there's something wrong with you and that you need to get more optimistic and get back in the game and start marching in the parade again. But that's all this is, right? This is just some kind of silly parade. And you only need the parade if you're addicted to parades or you have a preference for parades. I mean, I could come up with some food dish that they only eat in Hangpang, China. Now, the rest of the world is living without it. No problem. They're not sitting here feeling all blighted and deprived and denied. So obviously it's not something needed. But now the people in that place that eats it, now they have a preference for it. Why? Because they've acquired an attachment to it. The thing itself, though, has no meaning. It's just because it means something to them. And this life thing doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't serve any purpose. It has no accomplishment beyond satisfying a perception in human brains that say this is worth continuing. And it plainly, logically, rationally, through any process of reason, can't be defended. It's a pointless, silly waste. It's a squander of suffering for an empty, pointless, silly victory. Yeah, it's not enough of an argument. But that's the subject of antinatalism. Antinatalism, the subject of antinatalism is not some subject of psychology and what you like or what you dislike or your ego and all this other kind of crap. It's based on philosophical beliefs, understanding there's no God, which is a big piece of truth. I mean, if you accept evolution and its consequences, it's almost right there. That almost tells the whole story. I mean, if you're honest to the subject of evolution, it's almost impossible to understand it for what it is and call it a good thing. Really, there's no rational or logical way to make it into something other than the silliest, stupidest, most preposterous waste there is. Reproduction for the sake of reproduction. A stupid, silly molecule reproduces itself 4 billion years ago, and you people are just sitting there bowing to it and praising it like it did something worthy of something. And it's not worthy. We're just eccentric. We're not productive. We're not accomplishing anything. We're barely satisfying the needs we create by being here. Alright, well, enough. I've been over it. Well, the whole point of the video was to go over it again. But yeah, argue some of that. Argue evolution. Argue the real implications of pointless, purposeless, senseless, void of mission, rational, reasonable, logical mission, reproduction. And that's all there is. That's all this DNA thing is doing.